Hello and welcome back to another episode of the MXGP Podcast Show on Vital MX. Ernee, France has just hosted round 9 of the 2025 FIM Motocross World Championship, and therefore we are barreling towards the halfway mark. And truth be told, one title picture is becoming a little clearer, the other even more bewildering. So there's a lot to get into on this episode of the podcast, as well as some Motocross of Nations news, some silly season stuff. It's all going on, as you would expect, as we start to move into June. June, July is a very busy period for the paddock. And of course, our sponsors are always busy because they're working away producing magic, those being Polisport and Prox Racing Parts. Our sincerest thanks to those companies for their loyal support of this podcast, and my sincerest thanks to my co-host, On Track Off Road's Adam Wheeler, who's back again against all odds. How's it going?
Hey Lewis, good. Well, 1/3 into a 3-week consecutive run of races. Which doesn't sound much, especially when you compare it to sort of the SMX calendar, but it can be quite arduous, especially because MotoGP is almost like 5-6 days away. So it's quite a long time out. As for you, I'm curious as to why you're not as red as like a lobster, having, negotiated the first round of the outdoors. And 2, did you feel like getting embroiled in some controversy over the weekend to celebrate the fact that the French GP was at Ernee?
Well, first of all, if you could see my legs, they are red raw, embarrassingly red. They look like those sweets where the bottom half is white and the top half is red. So that's not good. My face, generally my face is okay. I rarely get sunburnt on my face. I guess I have enough issues in the head department, so God spared me that.
I've never seen you wearing a cap. As an Englishman, I admire that, But
okay. Once again, no, not once again. You have just told me that you're not all of the way through pulp. This comes up on there as well. My head is too big to wear a hat. I can't do it. I would love to wear
ridiculous.
A hat. I find hats. I think people who wear hats are cool. Like I look at people all the time through eyes of endearment, like, oh, look how cool they look in that hat. Oh, I want a hat. And my head's too big. It looks like a fat man wearing a medium t-shirt. It looks like it's just going to burst out at any moment. So it has been the disdain of the last 12 years of my life. I still hold on to the hope. I still walk into shops and try on a hat, hoping this will be the one. Like Cinderella, maybe this one will fit perfectly. And no, I just can't do it, and it hurts me dearly. I've got a hat in the other room from One Industries who sent me a package of casual, lovely hat. Opened it, and went, oh, that's sick. Put it on. I was like, it looks amazing, but just not on me.
Lewis, I think there's some sort of phobia you need to get over. I'm sure there's a hat that fits you, and also didn't Cinderella try to fit on some shoes?
Yeah, but same vibe.
Just like get like a Crocodile Dundee sort of hat, one of those big things,
No.
Maybe you have some corks hanging from it instead of a cap.
No, because I want to protect my reputation. I can't look like Crocodile Dundee. That would raise too many. That would be too far from the norm, and it would raise too many questions.
Well, people probably think you're Australian anyway.
Yeah, there is a lot of that. I did just see a comment on Pulp that told me to go home and take Lee Diffie with me, which is obviously difficult because if I'm dropping Lee Diffie off on the way, that'd be quite a round trip. And although I'm accommodating at the best of times, yes, far too much to ask of me. And the second part of your question, great to see Ernee go off without a hitch. Great to see everyone working together as one. And honestly, you can criticize this Grand Prix for being tough to pass at, maybe too old school for current racing, but I love it. The second I first glance at the venue, it fills my heart with joy. I pick up on the sense of magic that the venue holds, and it genuinely makes me smile more than any other track on the calendar, I would say.
Really?
Yes.
Oh God, that is surprising statement from you.
Well, I think it's because, and it maybe is because, my second ever international race as a fan was the 2005 Motocross of Nations. And previously I had gone to the 2004 Motocross of Nations, but I was still a little bit too disconnected to really embrace the goings on there. Whereas 2005, I really understood every single rider and was just amazed by the whole spectacle. So I think that still sways my opinion somewhat.
I was trying to remember where the 04 Nations was, and then it just popped in. Lierop, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, funny, because in contrast, Lierop, where all of the fans are hidden in the woods and you kind of don't get that sense of atmosphere, and then Ernee, which obviously is more like a stadium. You couldn't get two different venues.
Yeah, and I just love the irony, because there you were a couple of years ago, thrust into the eye of the storm as a media person trying to report the riders' unhappiness with the track, and then the authorities' position of, well, you're going to race and like it. And then now you are this media titan on the other side of the Atlantic. And then if you look last weekend, the French GP, I mean, Jeremy Seewer was one of the most proactive riders speaking up for the group all those, 4 years ago in Ernee. And there he was taking Ducati's second, ever podium. Also in a week where they rolled out their first ever production bikes, from the assembly lines in Bologna. So it's just funny how things all tie together.
Yeah, seeing Seewer on the podium did cause my mind to cast back to that tragic day in 2022. And it caused me to just think about Jeremy a little more and how he always seems to thrive whenever there's a little bit of spice in his life.
Also, I think you've kind of cast him off a little bit, in recent media appearances. Yeah, there's been a lot of favoritism towards Chase Sexton, Ben Watson, Jeffrey Herlings. Mikael Harrop was also the sort of, a new buddy, but Jeremy seems to have he seems like one of those old friends or just like a brother that you never mention and then suddenly you hear from and like, oh yeah, I remember,
well,
we have a great deal of warmth and affection between each other.
Well, that's heartbreaking to hear. First of all, I judge you so strongly for not using a Toy Story reference there, because that was literally just right in front of you.
Yeah.
Seems like Jeremy's the toy on the shelf. But you could have, honestly, it was right there in front of you. So I judge you fiercely for not picking up that.
Jeremy is not Wheezy the penguin.
Well, maybe I need to do better.
So. I mean, Saturdays with Seewer was pretty much the cornerstone of your MXGP, kind of outlet. And it just, I don't know, it's just long forgotten.
I know, it is Toy Story because Jeremy is Woody. And then now, for some reason, which he never did when I was in MXGP, Jeffrey is messaging me every day almost. So he's a Buzz Lightyear and it's all got buttons and everything. So you know what? You're right. There's room for everyone in my life.
On a more serious note, it really seems to be coming together, doesn't it? And also on a track like Ernee, where passing is more complicated compared to other GB tracks, the starting prowess of the Desmo 450 MX is something that's a major advantage. I mean, Seewer was always a pretty good starter anyway, but it just seems like that motorcycle has extra sort of something out of the gate. And at tracks like that, it's going to be like an extra string to the bow.
Yeah, I will say, though, I wholeheartedly agree the Desmo 450 has proven to be incredible out of the gate. But at the start of the year, we were clocking off, and I say we, I don't know why I said that, the Ducati team as a whole was clocking off whole shot after whole shot and constantly in the picture, whereas now it seems to be a little more sporadic from Jeremy, and Mattia seems to have lost that starting prowess. I feel like we've gone down a little bit from where we were at the start as far as consistency out of the gate. Not that it's bad.
That's a fair observation. Yeah, maybe confidence comes into it. Guadagnini was usually a pretty solid starter, but coming back from injury, maybe he's just missing some of that, I don't know, sharpness. I don't know, pure speculation.
But Jeremy's had a nice year. I feel bad now. I feel like I need to stop this podcast and call him.
Well, yeah, when we finish, just send him a message, I'll see him at the weekend, so I shall impart your what's the tidings.
I'm emotional. You can't throw something like that at me early in the podcast because now it's gonna be on my mind. But I do think, and I said this earlier in the season, and same ethos applies now. I think we're all overlooking what Ducati are doing in their maiden season because yes, Jeremy is a fantastic rider, and we all know how good he can be. So if you want to look at it very black and white, 2 podiums in 9 rounds for Jeremy Seewer is subpar. But for Ducati to have 2 podiums in their first 9 Grand Prix, I mean, I guess first 11, I guess, if you want to count Caroli and Lupino last year, I think that's amazing and deserves all the applause in the world. But for whatever reason, I think we've already slumped into a state of contentment with Ducati. And it's like, oh, they're just another manufacturer out there. And, oh, look, they got another trophy, you know?
I think we can't be too dismissive of what they're achieving. I mean, Triumph took a different route. They went into MX2, arguably with a technical platform you have to really overdevelop. It's a different philosophy. And Ducati went straight into the deep end, the most visual end, the biggest promotional window. And I think to already have had 2 podium finishes is, entirely creditable. And it also proves that the motorcycle is very capable. Is it going to be one of those things where it's been sort of engineered a little bit towards Jeremy Seewer's style? Then God knows. But, the results are there, and that's the most important thing.
I mean, if you look at it, Ducati's now had more podiums than Yamaha this year.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that's not a knock on Yamaha, but I'm just trying to paint a picture that Ducati is wrestling with these established greats who have got all of this knowledge and data and background behind them. And I think in maybe in a more technical sport like F1 or MotoGP, that would become more of a story. Maybe it's because we are so rider focused that the capability of the machine is less prolific. I don't know. It probably is that exactly, I would say.
But also, maybe this is unfair to say because HRC and Honda is such a behemoth in motorsport, but KTM are pretty much the racing tour de force in any kind of series, whether it is motocross, enduro, road racing. But I would say that Ducati and the knowledge and experience they're accumulating are really catching up because now they have some serious chops in off-road. Whereas before, I mean, they've been dominating MotoGP for the last half decade. They've also been extremely prominent since the early 90s in World Superbike. Their street bikes are phenomenal. And now they're sort of, gathering all this momentum in off-road as well. I think, KTM's position, even though we know the economics and the business side is somewhat turbulent at the moment, I mean, who knows what happens to KTM? Will it be a ready-to-race company still? Or will Bajaj, as the majority shareholder, say, okay, we want this company to be entirely off-road focused or entirely adventure bike, BMW challenging orientated? So I think there's the big question mark over what KTM will be in the future, but right now they are still this major sort of superpower in all sorts of forms of motorsport. But Ducati are really sort of catching up in terms of the diverse spread.
Do you think, and not to move on, but do you think that KTM's new position with Bajaj would want to lean heavily into the scooter market? Because Honda have spoken at length about how the scooter sales in Asia are effectively funding their entire operation. I remember the first time we went to Pankau Penang, Roger Harvey told me in an interview that the scooter sales in Indonesia alone trump
millions.
Yeah, they trump motocross sales across the world. Like, it's just not even a conversation. And to my knowledge, KTM kind of is irrelevant or hasn't even entered that market. So maybe Bajaj, with their local knowledge or their local expertise, that's going to be the angle that they shoot for. Of course, maybe not, because maybe they have a more global perspective.
Well, that's just it, because, before, especially with the Japanese brands, we might have spoken about this previously, but, look at Suzuki. I mean, a company that branched into sort of cars and automobiles. I mean, motocross is not even like a piece of hay in the pile for them. Brands like Honda and Yamaha use motocross and racing as like a development platform. Mm-hmm. Those engines that you see in outboard motors and, I don't know, pick a different kind of platform like lawnmowers or golf carts or whatever, the kind of engineering that's experimented on and the learnings they get from off-road racing go into different areas. Whereas KTM is very much an off-road performance brand, and that's where its roots are. And I think the thing that might appeal to Bajaj, and they won't want to rock the boat too much, is that the promotional aspect of their racing is such a powerful part of the company. It would be, I think, such a massive change if they suddenly scrapped it and said, okay, we're not going to race in Dakar, we're not going to race in enduro, we're going to completely wipe off MotoGP. If they're building street bikes, you do have that brief kind of or association with the models. But it's a good question, Lewis, because, being, the Indian market, the Asian market is all based around smaller capacity or smaller cylinder motorcycles. And I think, that's something, I'm surprised KTM didn't do it before. But as we said, they're off-road based. So will suddenly KTM start building a moped or a scooter, or, where will the business emphasis go? And how will that push into the racing? Because if they start doing, for example, 6 scooters, and they start trying to flood a little bit kind of different markets around the world, then they will need, something like MotoGP, which is extremely popular in sort of India and also Asia and South America as well. I think it depends on where they want to go, but it will be, I think, foolhardy just to sort of scrape off the heritage and the accomplishments of the racing division.
How much speculation or even panic was there in the MotoGP paddock this past weekend about the KTM investment and what this could mean in the future?
No, I mean, everything's kind of still up in the air. It was only this time last week that, the next business sort of foundations are being laid for the KTM of the future. The only noticeable difference is when I went into the garage on Friday morning, I saw the Bajaj sticker in the front of the fairing of the RC16s and stuck a sort of photo on Twitter. I mean, that was the only sort of difference really. But KTM have what? Over 40 factory riders on their roster. You'd have to think that some review of that motorsport program is going to be happening. And who knows, maybe Bajaj and the current CEO say, listen, guys, carry on what you're doing. We're happy with how this is putting KTM in the international visibility window for the community. Or they say, listen, we need to sort of hunker down a little bit, save some more costs, and be more focused on where we race.
How much do you know about Bajaj?
No, not too much, to be honest.
Like, where does their money, why do they have this money?
I think, is it Rajiv? I don't know how you say the name, the owner of the company. I mean, they're a major Indian manufacturer, and sort of their internal domestic market is a big deal. And KTM have had an association with them for years. I think they were producing the smaller cylinder bikes, or smaller capacity rather, in the country. They weren't doing anything over sort of 790. The bigger bikes were being made in Austria still. And, by all accounts, they still want to keep that Austrian factory base because, as we know, and you've been there only recently, there's lots of different kind of offshoots around Mattighofen and Mundafing, where, the little town next to Mattighofen, where things happen. But, yeah, it's, the racing isn't sort of sleeping. They're still developing. They're still making contracts. I mean, Chase Sexton's future, I think that's probably one of the big headlines at the moment. And also Jeffrey Herlings, what's he going to do? Rumors of him sort of looking and talking to other teams. The Coenen brothers is another sort of question mark. Pit Beirer, the KTM Motorsports director, by all accounts will be at the German Grand Prix this weekend. So I gather he's going to be having some more talks or some more assurances. In one aspect, it's kind of exciting. What was KTM's future going to be? In another way, it's I think they need to start nailing things down for 2026.
Just imagine, like, close your eyes, draw an image in your head of Jeffrey Herlings flying to India to try and just find as much money as he can for his new contract. The things that man would do. I imagine it's similar to like an idiot abroad, where he just turns up to India with a backpack and no plan, but just dead set on having a conversation with the man, whoever that is, to get the money he needs. I feel like
Herlings. Sorry, I'm going to tangent on your point there. France was okay, right? I mean, a better start. If he hadn't made that mistake in the second moto, then he would have been on the podium. He came very close to it anyway. And, what are we, almost halfway through the season? I would say things are maybe going as we would expect.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the tussle between Jeremy and Jeffrey for my love, and we very much saw that on the track as they tied on points for third overall. I think Jeffrey has been fine. If you count up, and now MXGP on their website has a very simple tool to see how many total points a rider has taken at a Grand Prix. And if you look at that number, Jeffrey has improved every single week since he came back. So I think the progress is clear for all to see, and that's encouraging. Maybe it has taken longer than anyone expected, I think, or maybe the expectation to begin with was higher than what it was. I think I fall into that category. But the progress is there. So there's no doubt, there's no way that anyone can argue that he's not on a promising path. And I think with certainty, he wins Latvia. I think Latvia will be the climax of this process. Tuchenthal, of course, he has a checkered past. And to be quite honest, he goes to Tuchenthal. And in my mind, I'm like, well, just survive that, similar to Lockett, and move on. But Latvia, I would wholeheartedly expect him to take his first win of 2025. And then from there on, start to factor more into this Coenen-Febvre dynamic.
I would keep the bar a little lower. I'd say Latvia could be the first podium. And also Germany, depending on what we find there. By all accounts, it's raining at the moment, but the weekend's going to be sort of dry with a chance of showers. Then that's also going to be very sort of rutty and hard pack and start dependent, kind of like it was in Ernee. But yeah, I would say Latvia, you have to be putting some decent money on him to be hitting the top 3. But I think the thing is, it's just we're so used to Jeffrey popping up and getting a win. I mean, I would love to know, this is probably a statistic you either know or you can find out, what has been his longest stretch of races without sort of bagging a 25 points for a moto win. I wouldn't mind betting it's no longer than like 3 to 4 GPs. And we're already beyond that from the point that he came back without a preseason to this current stage.
Yeah, I mean, if I scan now quickly, I'm trying to see if the beginning of 2017, of course, 1, 2, 3, 4,
well, he had
5,
a broken
6.
hand, didn't he?
Yeah, that was 9 races in that period. And then
9 GPs or 9 motos?
9 motos. Sorry, that was 11 motos.
But we've had 11, he's raced 11 motos or more than this current season.
Yes.
Yes or no?
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yeah, 12 now. But I think also part of the reason why Luongo and what was before Luongo? Agada. I think that the crash with Febvre in the qualifying race at Agada was maybe more serious than anyone let on, and that's why Luongo and Agada were quieter races. And I think that's why normal service has been resumed now. I think there's no doubt.
Weather hit.
What?
Both GPs are weather hit as well.
But I think there's no doubt that Ernee was his best GP of the season, a massive step forward, encouraging for all, and above everything, that start in the first moto was ridiculously impressive for Jeffrey.
Yeah,
I mean, he didn't even whole shot, but that was like seeing a leprechaun jump off of a rainbow or a flying pig.
The thing is as well, if Herlings makes a top 3 start, then his chances of winning the moto are, high. And it was actually a little bit surprising to see him in that first moto cede ground to Febvre. I mean, I know Febvre has this kind of extra Ernee power anyway, and that second race win against Lucas Coenen demonstrated that. If there's anything if Romain has a critical flaw, it's just like making mistakes at key moments. But, he didn't really do that. He was incredibly diligent, and we haven't spoken about him yet on the podcast. I mean, I thought this was a fantastic victory. He tied on points with Coenen with 1, 2, 2, 1 motor results for both riders. But I thought this was superb, and it kind of really harked back to 2015 Romain Febvre, where he won the Grand Prix. He starred at the Motocross of Nations, his first appearance with Team France, and here we are sort of 10 years later, and he's on course for maybe grabbing that championship. My thoughts are all over the place, because I also wanted to ask you about Herlings, but when it comes to Febvre, there's currently like a storyline in MotoGP at the moment with Marc Marquez and the fact that he might win a championship since 2019. He might, various operations and injuries and what have you. And I think Febvre's story could be equally as impactful, to a motorcycle racing audience. I mean, Febvre won in 2015. He came incredibly close in 2021, as we know. But, 10 years between championships, there's got to be some kind of record if he makes it. So that's a big thing, and something I want to talk to him about in Germany. Sorry, go on. I
think that's a headline you can sell to a mainstream outlet, isn't it? Athlete wins again 10 years on. Like, that is, no matter the sport, no matter the setting, that's quite a ridiculous feat, because time stands still for no man. And typically, if you haven't won in 10 years, that kind of means it's passed you by. It will also open up quite a fascinating dynamic to look back on Febvre's career, because in 5 years' time, when you look back and see that he won potentially in 2015 and 2025, I think that will make you wonder more so why he didn't win more between. Because not only did he not win a championship in that 10-year period. There were also periods where he went a very long time without a Grand Prix win. So really, arguably, a career that doesn't, again, if he gets his second title, a career that doesn't really compare to anyone else's. I struggle to think of any sort of comparison that would be worthwhile. I mean, I'm looking at it now. He didn't win at all in 2017 and 2018, and then he won just once in 2019. Like, at that point, all signs would have indicated that, okay, he's not getting any younger. He got the championship. That ideology is gone now. He can be a winner, but championship is far gone. He can't even win a GP. And then here we are. And then let alone the fact that Ice One could potentially get their first championship, something that they themselves would have expected far before this. And also, there's a poetic nature to it, because not only was it 10 years ago that Febvre won a championship, but Febvre won the championship because Ice One kind of cruelly lost it. They were the ones who were en route to that. Neither party on a Kawasaki at that point.
Yeah, Max Nagel in 2015, and the wheels came off the bus, in Tuchenthal. So it's all kind of tying together.
It's like a Disney film.
And yeah, I mean, also Febvre's 33. I struggle to think of a rider that may have been older to potentially be world champion. I have to check what age Stefan Everts was when he won his last title in 2006. But no other rider of that age sort of comes to mind. And, of course, Febvre famously won in his first season as a rookie, and because he had to jump in the Premier class by courtesy of the age rule by, a 24-hour period. But also, I think we may have asked this on the last podcast, but last Kawasaki world champion in the Premier class. There's lots for you to look up, Lewis. Give me lots of homework.
Yeah, I'm just looking. Caroli was 32 when he won his last world championship.
Okay, so Febvre trumps him.
Yeah, for some reason I had it in my head that Caroli was 33, but I guess not.
Everts, we need to look at Everts.
Everts would have been older. I mean, maybe it's because I was super young at that point, so I just looked at everyone as really old. But
I'll have a look at Everts. But yeah, I mean, we were saying in the last show as well, a Monster Energy Championship. There's lots of sort of factors that would sort of be a nice novelty for Febvre wrapping up this championship. But then again, it's a story we've seen with a Frenchman before, but Lucas Coenen, if he also wins in his first season, then that's another sort of story by itself. And, the way that the Belgian is starting and riding, just flush with confidence. I still think that 450 has yet to sort of bite him quite hard in a Grand Prix race.
But is that not to his credit? I feel like early in the season there were some mistakes where it was like, oh boy, and then I feel like those have flatlined somewhat, and we actually don't have much data of him having minor mistakes in recent memory. I almost have, dare I say, Lucas Coenen, to clarify, not Sasha Coenen, Lucas Coenen has maybe shed that, what's the word? Stereotype in my mind.
Oh, okay.
Like, I don't look at him in that manner anymore.
Yes. Yeah, good point. I think the starting prowess of really, that's really helping him. Like we said before, he's a little bit more in that Prado school. I mean, I'd like to see him come through from 10th place or do kind of like a typical Herlings race. I don't think we see too many of those. But then if you are that good out of the gate with 450 power, KTM power, then you don't need to do all that hard work. We still haven't seen it. We have to go to sort of the Sand of Lommel. We need to go sort of to the Locket Hardpack. There's a few more tests coming up, I think, on the 450. But, you have to sort of admire his resilience to sort of throw this at Febvre. And thank goodness for that, because if he was dropping every other moto, then again, you'd be looking at a sort of Tim Geiger situation where Febvre's locking this thing up through steadiness.
I said it on a previous podcast, but I stand by it now. I think this season will very much emulate 2023, except in this position, Febvre is Prado and Coenen is Febvre. I think that they will constantly swap moto wins, but Febvre will always be there. He will win less GPs than Coenen, most likely, but ultimately it won't make much difference to the point total because, I
don't know. 47 points is not that many.
Yeah, but it is when Febvre isn't really doing much wrong.
Yeah, okay.
Of course.
It's one of those awkward gaps, isn't it? Because all it takes is one GP where, Febvre's been sick in the past and he's turned up to race. I think Majora sticks in the mind. And, he's conceded quite a lot of points. If I was him, I'd be trying to wrap myself in cotton wool for, what is going to be quite a hefty part of the season. And there's a lot of travelling to be done. I mean, that's maybe where Febvre's experience at 33 years old might come into play, whereas Coenen will be thinking, what time zone am I in this week? As we bounce from China to Australia and wherever else.
Or, to play devil's advocate, Coenen's naivety could favour him in that scenario because he just kind of throws himself into those situations without overthinking it much, whereas Febvre could be worrying too much about sleep and timings and food and this. Like there is a world where naivety favours you in that situation, I think. Maybe.
Okay, so 2 questions at this point. Who wins the championship, and does Jeffrey Herlings stay a Red Bull KTM rider?
Febvre wins the championship without doubt. And yes, I think that Herlings stays a Red Bull KTM rider. You could tell the absolute confidence in my voice there. It was earth-shattering.
Okay. I can tell you've been privy to some,
No, I was just running, as I was talking, I was running through all of the scenarios. To be honest, to my knowledge, with silly season in MXGP, with the exception of Kevin Horgmo, which we'll get to, nothing is happening. I think it's all just hit a bit of a stalemate, and I don't really know why. I think Tim and Jeffrey need to figure their stuff out before anyone else can move, and that seems to be taking longer than anyone would have expected, especially Tim, because that we covered it, so we don't need to go into it, but that, in my mind, was a no-brainer that he would re-sign, and yet there seems to be some dragging of the heels from one side or the other. But I think that I've been adamant since the start that Jeffrey Herlings is Jeffrey Herlings, a phenomenal talent, Red Bull KTM's poster child, and they would be silly to let him go, as would Baja, and I just don't see how that is a bad judge. Oops. There goes our Bajaj money.
Well, Baja is a rally, isn't it?
Yes, I've done that before. I did that last week as well.
I can't pull you up for mispronunciation because I do it on almost every podcast.
Well, to be honest, that wasn't mispronunciation. That was just the wrong word. And yeah, I think Jeffrey Herlings is going to be a title contender next year. I think that the attention that he brings worldwide is brilliant. I think actually, if you're in Bajaj's position, and this is a bold new front, I think that you need Jeffrey Herlings just to sort of drive a positive PR campaign, let alone the factor of you don't want Jeffrey Herlings on another bike in the final year or two of his career, because that would be a PR disaster, I do believe. And I think that, once again, KTM or Bajaj should offer Jeffrey the same money he's on now, if not more, because I think that if I'm doing these negotiations, I'm saying, right, we know Jeffrey can win. We maybe haven't used him much on the marketing side, or as much as we would have liked to. So we need to put a contingency in place to really market the hell out of him at the end of his career, documentaries, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm going to Herlings and being like, right, you're going to win, but we also want you to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that maybe even equals more money. I think it's a worthwhile investment.
To put your devil's advocate hat on for a moment, what if you sign Chase Sexton? Or if you don't sign Chase Sexton, what if you sign Eli Tomac? And tie up Lucas Coenen, who in theory could be the 2025 MXGP World Champion, to a multi-year deal. Suddenly you're looking at your portfolio, and aside from the history and the association, which has its value, of course, why would Jeffrey suddenly be an indispensable signature?
Well, first of all, as far as I know, I think Tomac may be there next year. The Coenen thing is still confusing to me. I still don't know. Where there's smoke, there's fire, I do believe, but everyone still tells me he has a contract. He can't go anywhere. So I honestly don't know. And truth be told, I know the Coenens are a little off the wall, but why would you want to move on? I mean, the Ducati setup is clearly one that's working quite well. I think you can even sense from social media and just their demeanour that they're quite happy in their surroundings. So I don't even know why they would want to move on, let alone why they would. And then I think Jeffrey, again, I just think Jeffrey brings something that Coenen can never quite match, both on the track and off of it. I think that Jeffrey is the type of talent on and off the bike that comes along once in a while, and you need to squeeze that orange, to link it to KTM, squeeze that orange for all it's worth and get every single drop of juice out of that. And if you let him walk without having done that, which I truth be told, I do think that at this point, they haven't got everything they want out of him off the bike, or not want out of him, but could have got out of him. I think that would be silly. I would sit in that I would be in the KTM room going, look, okay, I know money's tight. I know we've got these other riders, blah, 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 blah. I don't feel comfortable with seeing him walk away because I don't think we've done a good enough job of getting a return on our investment. And I think we've got more to do. Yeah.
I agree with you, but I also think racing can be ruthless. And for the first time, I think his position is maybe under threat. I mean, like I say, you have the Coenens, you have big money investments in the US, like, star names. For the very first time, I think Jeffrey is more of a commodity to KTM. And, I love history and I love sort of heritage and stuff like that. And I think, the story with Herlings and KTM is, it's almost unparalleled in modern motorsport. I mean, there are not many riders who have a singular association or partnership with a brand like him. I mean, it's like 15 years or something. And it would be a shame just to cut that off so he could venture off for another 1 or 2 years with another brand and suddenly become a heroic kind of Monster Energy athlete and then wear their cap for the next 5 years doing activities and promotions. Yes, but, if he wants X amount of money, Lewis, and you kind of have to look a little bit towards the future of the brand, especially at a time when KTM have to be ultra careful with their purse strings, then, maybe it's time that the story has to end. I mean, I hope not. I mean, like you say, I think it's a brilliant sort of narrative and it has to continue. So, and Herlings isn't done, as we've said on the podcast, even just now. So, he could go on like a 3 GP tear of season victories and mixing things up nicely for Coenen and Febvre. So, but it's tricky. And the thing is, like you said, until these two are sorted out contractually for the silly season won't sort of kick into gear because nobody can really know how much they can spend on other people.
Yeah, and no one knows what seats are available either, because if Tim, for whatever reason, again, leaves Honda, that's a wild cat amongst the pigeons, because no one expected there to be a Honda spot.
Yeah.
Similar with Jeffrey leaves KTM.
What did you think of the photo of him with Giuseppe Luongo?
I sent it to someone and said, with zero knowledge, I'm going to guess that Giuseppe sweated a lot less in this dinner than his one with Jeffrey. Which I think is probably fair, right? I'd imagine Tim's line of questioning wasn't quite as aggressive. And also, you know what? I'm going to message Jeffrey right now, because I also wondered this. Who paid? Because as far as we know, Jeffrey and Giuseppe may be quite similar in not being so forthcoming with opening their wallets, with all due respect. So I'd imagine that was a bit of a debate as well.
No, I would argue the opposite. I think Giuseppe has been... Everyone has this image of him as this money-grabbing goblin, but, I know for a fact that he opens his wallet to, to support the sport. And, it's all kind of done a little bit on the quiet, but there have been instances where in the best interest of GP, either because it was at a time when, he was maybe being a little bit manipulative over sort of, the AMA Pro Nationals, he kind of was... using his cash to benefit the series. If you want a small example, then Ben Townley was famously invited to Giuseppe's yacht at a time when he wanted to disappear off to the US and was persuaded basically to stay one more year in MXGP in 2005, I think it was. When he jumped on the 450 and became like the second rider to take MXGP and MX2 GP wins. So, and I would just love to know how that meeting with Tim came around. Maybe sort of on holiday while he's convalescing from his shoulder injury. But I'm sure sort of Giuseppe had some pearls of advice when it comes to sort of business and I don't know, making a strategy for the future.
I don't really understand where Giuseppe is or what he's doing. He's just gone.
Well, I think he kind of has like an ambassador role, maybe contributing to the state of MXGP now, but a guy like him who's been in sports promotion for 40 years, I mean, he has a pretty good contact book, and also being based like in Monaco, I'm sure he knows more than enough people of influence.
I've never spoken to Giuseppe.
Really?
Giuseppe. Wow, I don't know. I was having a stroke then. I've never even said hello to him.
Oh, okay. He's an extremely charming guy, laughs very easily. He's great company, great sort of to be in his company. And
Well,
when he loses it, when he's angry, then you know about it. And there's been a couple of times where, as a journalist trying to point out some of the inconsistencies of then Ustream's policies or their ways to try and change the sport and drag it into sort of the modern era. I kind of, you felt that sometimes, but you cannot accuse him of not giving a shit about motocross, because he could have easily made a ton of money, and he has, and just walked away and let some other vulture circle it. And you may disagree with some of the policies or the, some of the, I don't know, structure of the sport he brought to Grand Prix racing. But then I always say, if you think some other company is going to come in and run Grand Prix motocross at a loss or not view it as a business, then you're incredibly naive.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I think the Luongos do get a lot of shit that they don't deserve, and the last thing we want is to consider him a money-grabbing goblin, which
well, I think he's been called far worse than that. I'm not sort of standing here waving my Giuseppe Longo flag, or I'm not preaching like I'm some sort of buddy or close contact, far from it. But I do recognize what he's done for motocross, and I do recognize some of the controversies that's attracted, and some of the criticism, rightfully so. But I think also David, his son, or Dan, as we like to affectionately call him, has brought maybe more diplomacy, certainly a more modern kind of open attitude towards relationships. And I think it's also credit to David's sort of work and slightly more laid back attitude, I guess you could say, in that he's bringing, tracks like Australia, and trips to China and stuff like that. I mean, and also talking a lot with like Davey Coombs and Feld and MX Sports. I mean, the kind of union now going on in globally with motocross was such a, if you sort of said all this in 2007 or 2008, we would have thought utter bollocks. But yeah, it's I think it's a positive thing. I'm just waiting for the day for them to announce an MXGP and Pro National singular event. I think that'll be mega.
Yeah, that really died down. Well, it hasn't died completely, but the hype was much higher 2 years ago.
Well, SMX has to sort of make room for it somehow.
Yeah, that's true. Just circling back to Jeffrey before we move on, his 200th Grand Prix. So, congrats. That's quite a milestone. And 107 of 201.
Oh, wow. I would have thought there'd been more than 200. But
well, Adam, I don't know how to put this, but I don't know if you're aware, but Jeffrey's had a bit of an odd problem with turning up consistently.
Yes. Absenteeism, is that what it's called?
Yes. But still, 200 GPs started, 107 won. That is ridiculous. Like, that's crazy. Jumping forward quite dramatically, speaking of city season, we did have one shoe drop last week. Kevin Horgmo re-signed with Honda SR Moto Blues Motul, to the surprise of just about everyone. Not that he's staying there, but more that he moved too quickly. I think Kevin Horgmo was certainly in line for a factory ride, a factory conversation, and no longer. He's
Yeah, but where?
I think he would have slotted in nicely at Fantic, maybe second Kawasaki rider, maybe Yamaha, if Renault and Gertz leave, or I guess Flanderin's up as well. Yeah. Ducati, I don't know what Mattia's contract situation is, but why not Ducati's second seat? Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not saying it would have happened with certainty, but I think it would have been worth a conversation.
Okay.
I would bet wholeheartedly, I say wholeheartedly a lot, I would bet with wholeheartedness.
Conviction.
But when that PR dropped, there were some factory teams going, oh, damn it, we were going to talk to him.
I wonder how much more support he'll get from Honda Motor Europe. That's another question.
Well, not to put my top journalist of the year hat on, but I did that research. Sent a message to a party, and I said that there must have been like a commitment of technical support, or even like, I was thinking maybe Horgmo is about to fill in for Tim Geiser, and the way that he would get that deal is like, yeah, we're not losing you after this year though, so we'll give you this, but you need to commit. And truth be told, last week I was told no, but then in Ernee there were some faint rumours of him filling in for Tim. But apparently none of that. Apparently there's no technical support, there's no promise of extra in 26.
Yeah, we've said this before. I mean, HRC and HME are very different bodies. While I'm sure they wouldn't mind sharing like a brake lever here or there, I just don't think there's much cohesiveness, if I had to speculate.
No, but we've said this before as well, that Horgmo specifically has been a brilliant step up for HME, Honda Motor Europe, because that program across multiple teams has very much struggled to just have an impact on the sport. It's always been HRC's red-headed stepchild that kind of hasn't really justified its existence. And Horgmo doing what he's doing at Honda SR Moto Blues Motor is kind of a resurgence for the Honda support network, I think, as well. Makes it more attractive than it was.
On the subject of riders being considered for factory spots, who are you more impressed with, Ernee? Andrea Bonacorsi or Isaac Gifting, who both finished 5th and 6th?
Well, of course, Well, I would say without doubt that I'm more impressed with Isaac Gifting because of the 4th in the second moto. But equally, I'm very impressed with Andrea Bonacorsi and the fact that he's doing this not in the sand. That's the fact that Andrea Bonacorsi has seemed to have found this level somewhat consistently now. And I would argue, we'll get into it, but Koldenhoff has suffered a little bit of a dip in form. I think he's dealing with some health issues. But Bonacorsi has now risen to be the number one rider on that team at the moment, you could argue. And he was a late addition. So I think that Bonacorsi is proving to Fantic why he was given that shot.
Yeah, I think I said it in an earlier podcast. I love the energy that he brings. It's a good call on the track surface as well. I mean, he's still young, and I think there's potential there for him to develop pretty much in the same vein as like a Ruben Fernandez. I think I kind of class them pretty much in the same bracket. But Gifting, this Swedish kid is just struggled for so long to have any kind of consistency or flow due to injuries or opportunities, and he is able to stick that bike, near the front of the field and post a result. He again is maybe a bit of a Calvin Verlandren, and that the potential is there, but you don't see it enough. And I would like for him to get more support in 2026 because he could be one of those kind of Jake Nichols style late bloomers. But yeah, it was a good ride at the weekend.
I think that Gifting is maybe seen as too much of a risk. I think that he needs to prove to be more reliable. Not necessarily my opinion, but I think that surrounding these good rides is too much inconsistency, too many nil points, too many mistakes. I think that is worrying for someone looking to invest support.
Is it only his second year on a 450? Or third?
Yes, second.
Okay. Second. I think he would still be just sort of, briefly knowing him and his attitude. I think you would invest in that really and just hope that he can stay healthy.
Well, Horgmo and Gifting, both Polosport riders. Polosport, snapping levers? That's weak and outdated. Polosport's APT unbreakable levers bend on impact, bend back to their original shape, and let you keep riding. With a stainless steel core built for war, they are rock solid, strong, and designed to match the OEM levers, shape, and specs. For Polosport's APT unbreakable levers stand up to every challenge. Thank you to Polosport and congrats to them on their Polosport APT unbreakable levers, which are so very amazing to all who use them.
That was a pretty poor read.
Yeah, it really was.
The last shows were good, but that one was.
It always happens when there's a new read. You take one go just to figure out the flow of it, the cadence of it. So stay tuned next week. Really exciting to see how I handle it on my redemption arc. Is there anything else 450 wise?
Yes, Maxime Renault. Disappointing second moto. What was he, P4 in the first?
Yes.
I didn't see what happened to him, or maybe I missed it.
He crashed twice, I think in the second corner, and then crashed again with a back marker.
Okay, I was at Silverstone, so it was difficult to follow exactly what was going on. And then Paul Jonas as well. I know he's kind of riding himself back to fitness. I feel a bit sorry for Ben Watson, really. There we go. I don't want to trigger you, Lewis, but that was a good set of results on a track that you wouldn't necessarily say was a strong Watson one. Maybe the starts are getting. I know you're bursting to say something, but I think maybe the starts are getting a little bit better. And there was someone else I wanted to. And Yago Goetz. I mean, is he kind of riding himself out of that Yamaha contract a little bit? Would you currently renew?
I would put Yago. If we know that Hans Corvers loves Yago, if I'm managing that situation, and if I would suspect that Hans maybe puts him into a Benoit Paturel situation where, like, hey, go on this Yamaha team and I'll give you some support and help you and look after you. I think that re-signing Yago to a 1-year deal on a factory team would be a massive risk that could pay off. Certainly. We know how good Yago is. But I think it's too much of a risk at this point with the results we have at this point in time. If there starts to become a couple of sevenths, then I think, yes,
he needs to finish motos. He really needs to finish motos. But you say we know how good he is. I mean, we know how good he is on a 250. We just haven't seen much of it on a 450. And to be able to prove that you can make that step, and also against tougher opposition, more experienced opposition, he needs to show something soon, I think.
Well, do you, and I somewhat do this, do you disregard the Redbud 450 ride now? As just, it's the Nations is different. We've seen a lot of riders step up and stand out at the Nations.
But the bizarre thing is, if you really want to be critical of Yago's career, you could say at key moments, at the special critical moment where he had to produce, he wasn't able to. In the battles with Tom Vial, I mean, it really came down to one moto, one race, a certain location, and that cost him the championship. And I also think it was Villars-sur-Ocaux, the French GP, where he had the massive crash down the hill, took an injury where he should have been in championship contention as well. That was a huge stage at Redbud. And I thought it was energetic. I thought it was full of promise. And, I know he's had some gnarly injuries, especially with his elbow since sort of like trying to tame a 450. But, the sad fact is I just don't think you can warrant a place on a factory Yamaha team with that kind of result sheet so far. I mean, that was certainly the case for like Ben Watson. And maybe we are slightly, judgmental in that respect with that context and history. But you're right, Lewis. I think, if you give him a well-supported sort of satellite ride and say, listen, build the career back up, then that's already like a cool allowance in a sport that doesn't really pause and allow riders to, the time to progress.
Maybe Yago is on his Kevin Strybos arc.
Yeah. Good shout. Kevin went to Hitachi KTM, rode a 350, and reinvented himself before going back to a factory Suzuki.
And maybe this is the most controversial thing I've ever said on this podcast, and I do not necessarily... Don't laugh. I'm not necessarily saying that I believe this, but it just hopped into my mind. At the weekend, I said to Tom in an interview,
Tom Vial.
Yeah, I said, I'm kind of waiting for you to win in American motocross like you did in GPs. We're in year 3 now. When is this going to happen? Because he's kind of just become like a 3rd, 4th place guy. And he said, the level's just so much higher here. We're so much faster. So, relating this to Yago, is it possible that we are overestimating the level of MX2 from, say, 2018 to 20 whatever?
Yeah, good point.
It's not a good point. It was just a controversy. It was just a... I'm not saying...
No, I thought it's a really good point, because... Is it also, for Vial's case, is it something where the machinery comes into it? I mean, he had a full factory KTM. I mean, he was smaller, he was a great starter, and how many of his races were sort of, born from that ability to get out front early on, which is something that maybe he's struggling to do in the Nationals.
Yeah, I think the KTMs here are slower.
Yeah, I think that's obvious through the spread of results. I mean, they're much more sort of diverse, whereas in MX2, you need to be on an Austrian bike. I mean, that's the simple truth. But, for Goetz with a 450, it's, he hasn't shown any sign of really being able to master it or the opposition that he's facing in the category. And it would be a shame if his career comes down to sort of one of those question marks where you're like, well, you remember that Belgian kid who nearly won the World Championship a couple of years in MX2?
Yeah.
What happened to him?
And you'll go, who? And you'll go, the Belgian kid. Who? The one with the funny social media. Oh, yes.
What's the other question I had for you?
Well, did you want me to tackle Ben Watson, or did you feel like...
Yeah, well, no, just give us the Ben Watson update, because that was a good GP.
First of all, do you feel like... You mentioned that you don't feel like I love Jeremy enough. Do you feel like I do a good enough job with my Ben Watson love?
Yeah, Ben's still there. Ben's still on the radar.
So I won't go too hard here. No, it's really good. It really is. Like, the result is never started X, went back to Y. The result is always that is as far as he managed to climb by the time the checkered flag waved, which means there's more there, which means these results are not like peak. So if you look beyond that, like, he's the only one really making passes in this bloody championship. He needs starts still. The first moto start was good. Average, let's say. By any other factory rider's standard, it would have been a bad start. But for Ben and Beto, it was a good start. Second moto, I have no idea. He wheelied. I messaged him and asked if he wanted me to help with starts, and he said no. So I'm not in that conversation.
There was a rider who popped a major wheelie out of the gate. Was that
sure it wasn't Ben?
Because I didn't go back.
Yeah, it was Ben.
Was it? Because I looked, I thought, who the hell is that?
Ben.
But I didn't sort of go through and look again and sort of freeze frame it.
Yeah, it was Ben. But I honestly, and we know that I have high expectations. I'm honestly really impressed with where this is going, because let's not forget as well, Ben did miss all of last year with an injury and is rebuilding from that as well. So you could argue that he's still on the climb as far as fitness and just readapting to race situations.
Is there any other rider in MXGP that knows the fringe of the top 10 and trying to come back into that little bracket more than Ben Watson? Valentin Guillot?
See, I'd like to... I feel like that's a bit of an insult to Ben, but it's true, isn't it? I don't know.
Where would Ben be in the Nationals?
First.
No. You sure? Would he be beating Valentin Guillot?
There's a lot of Guillot discussion. I don't know. It's like, I didn't realise that Guillot had such a hard D on the end.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like some sort of villain from a superhero movie.
It really does. Someone from The Incredibles. I would know, like, Ben is a better... Well, I think this goes without saying, doesn't it? Ben is a better rider than Guillot and Patrell. Right? Yes.
No idea.
He's certainly a better rider than Guillot, because we don't know who that is.
Yeah, Guillot.
No, I think Ben's doing really good, and I think the climb is still coming. And you know it's on the climb, because typically I get some messages from people in the paddock saying, like, why are you so high on Ben Watson? Not this year. I'm getting messages saying you were right to be so high on Ben Watson.
Okay.
The tide has turned.
You know, that's vindication.
Finally, on MXGP, I did want to say someone who is very good with common sense raised this to me, and I've never heard something make so much sense in my life. Thibaut Benestant trains with Yves Demarié, so he's essentially training with the Honda SR Moto... What?
No. That's
okay.
Yeah, go on.
Did I pronounce it wrong?
No. Okay. You pronounced it perfectly.
So he's essentially training with Honda SR Moto Blues Motul. He has to go to MXGP next year. So just bet all your money on Benestant taking Ferrato's position. Right?
Poor Alberto.
Alberto, it wasn't too long ago that Alberto was like top 5 guy, gonna be on a podium soon, lock him down. But ultimately,
KTM.
Yeah, like hard to describe just how much on the rise he was. But ultimately, I think it was a little bit his decisions that have led him to this position, because he turned his back on KTM support and he left the gravy train that he was kind of on. So,
well, I mean, fairness, he did sign for Standing Construct, and you know they are one of the premier teams in MXGP. So I don't think you could quite foresee how that one would turn out. But obviously, like crashing and breaking most of his ribs, it wasn't part of the plan. But you know, again, maybe like Yago, like an Isaac Gifting, you know, one of these riders that perhaps deserves another chance still.
I don't know. I think that's a tough sell.
Yeah.
I think that's a tough sell.
It is.
On to MX2 quickly. Somehow we've done an even worse job I mean, because I also want to get to Asen. So should we do our trademark?
Skip over, you mean?
Well, shall I just run through it and then you can tell me what you like?
No, I really want your latest thoughts on Simon Längenfelder, because I think it's a very confusing set of circumstances for you. And Simon just seems to be blowing kind of hot and cold, extremely hot, or a little bit kind of tepid. And I mean, he has the red plate. And I love some of the, he was fighting with Andrea Adamo, like his Red Bull KTM teammate, sort of, because they wear the same colours. Well, not really. I mean, Adamo's wearing Alpine Star gear, and Längenfelder's, of course, a fly racing rider. But, they have that Ducati and Austrian team separation, but they're on the same bikes, essentially, maybe prepped by different people. And, they had that battle in the second moto, and Adamo in the press conference afterwards said he thought that Längenfelder's first lap move to sort of cut him off from jumping the triple was a bit sketchy. He also made a bit of a bub comment saying, I don't want the red plate now. I'd rather have it at the end of the season, just after Längenfelder had sort of, enthused or been very sort of, overjoyed on the podium at having that. And he was the last German to have it, in the MX2 class for a couple of years, right before we head to the German GP.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. So in that, and then Kai de Wolf just having an absolute nightmare of a Grand Prix. MX2 is just becoming sort of this really scrappy arena that you don't really know what's going to happen next.
Yes, and some would say that I always saw this coming with Simon Längenfelder, but then others would say that I backed away this year, so can't take any credit. So that's difficult for me. Längenfelder is a really good rider, and I would argue he's even better than this. However, if I look at what's coming up, I think if I'm betting on anyone to make it difficult on Kai to regain the ground he lost, I'm betting on Adamo, because I think Adamo will just be extremely consistent. Whereas, because when I look at, although both of them, I mean, we are now entering the sand part of the championship a little bit. So that will favour Kai and open the door for Längenfelder and Adamo to make mistakes. I don't think that either of them are terrible in the sand, but perhaps the tendency to just tip over or lose points will be higher there. So I'm very aware and conscious of where we are heading as a series geographically. With that being said, for de Wolf to make up 25 points on Längenfelder when these riders have just been swapping points fairly consistently for some time now without a clear leader, that'll be difficult too. As you said, very difficult to make a bet, very difficult to pick a name. I'm drawn to Adamo's consistency, but that doesn't necessarily make me have conviction.
You said Kai is going to be world champion. Do you still stand by that?
I don't know.
Well, the way I see it, right, is that you have a set of 5 or 6 riders on a very similar performance level. That means if Simon Längenfelder starts 5th or 6th, then his potential to come back and grab points on the others at the front is going to be that much smaller. I mean, if he starts outside the top 10, there's a good chance he can come back to that sort of 6th, 5th, 7th position. But anything more than that, then he's going to be losing points each weekend. And I think that's where Adamo might thrive, because he's starting well and he is sort of picking up points consistently. And I mean, he's moved up from maybe the top 4 after the first sort of 3 to 4 GPs. I know he had a great result at the first Grand Prix, but then after that, there was a couple of wobbly moments. I think a technical problem as well, if I remember.
Yeah, I think that's important to state though. Like, Adamo has a nil points on his scorecard, which no other rider has. So yes, de Wolf just had a terrible GP, but Adamo already has no points scored in a moto. So for him to be where he is perhaps not a true representation of how good he's been, because give him a 10th place in that moto, he's your championship leader.
Yeah, and why was Kai so, careless in Ernee? That was like a rollback to the Kai de Wolf of 3 years ago.
You know what?
Where he made a mistake, he would make another mistake, and you think, listen, just breathe, reset, and ride your race.
That's exactly what I said to someone. It feels like Kai reverted to old ways. But so he crashed on Saturday and injured his ankle. Everyone thought it was his shoulder, but it was his ankle. And I presumed that kind of led to Sunday's mess. But from people I've spoken to, that isn't that much of an issue. And Sunday's mess was just a result of situation. Everything happened. Landed on someone, got landed on. Ended up stuck in a hose or a TV wire on the side of the hill. Tip overs.
Yeah.
It was just a poster child for a messy Grand Prix.
I did think those advertising boards were pretty close to the edge of the track going down the hill. I mean, there's not much room for mistake there. And we know it's also a pretty serious accident hotspot. Just ask Max Anstey. But yeah, I mean, I wonder what else is going on with the Wolf. Maybe there is some sort of offer or opportunity for 2026 that's on his mind.
I think 2026 he's locked in, I do believe.
But we don't know the colour or the team or the bike.
No, locked in. I think he's locked in at the start.
Right.
I mean, potentially, I guess the colour could change, as it always could with the Austrians.
Yeah. But I also, just to finish my point about, there being 5-6 riders going for this thing, or being at a similar speed, you do have the 3 KTM riders, you have Liam Everts, and you have Kaida Wolf. Then you have these sort of buzzing presences like, Lata, Zanchi, maybe McClellan on sort of a given day. I mean, Sasha Coenen is just a nutcase. I mean, you never know if he's going to hold shot and disappear, or how many times he's going to crash in each moto. If that suddenly clicks for him, I know it's a big if and we've been waiting for a while, then he's also going to be a guy who's taking points away from other people. And then you have to give credit to sort of these newcomers that flare up. I mean, Oriol Oliver was a very unexpected fourth, I think. I mean, the Spaniard is progressing.
Yeah, I like Oriol Oliver. I think he's a good rider, underrated rider. 4 KTMs in the top 4. They finally got rid of those pesky Husqvarnas to make us feel like it's 2008 all over again. I wonder a little bit if the MX2 results are a result of the hard-to-pass, unique, quirky, pokey Ernee track. Perhaps, Oriol Oliver in 4th, Valerio Lata in 5th.
Adamo had a good go at it.
Yeah, to be honest, both second motos were great. It was,
and it just looks gnarly as well, doesn't it, Ernee? I mean, fuck, it's just some of the ruts and bumps and the landings as well. You just sort of close your eyes sometimes.
Yeah, I just love Ernee. It's so unique. To me, Ernee is MXGP because you're never, ever, ever getting a track like that in America or Australia or that is MXGP's USP. That is that encapsulates MXGP to me, because
as well.
Luongo is cool, but Luongo fairly anonymous. Aside from the trees, maybe I'm being harsh on Luongo. I love Luongo, so maybe you know what? I didn't mean to bash Luongo in my Ernee love. That was collateral damage. I didn't mean that. Kozar, we can talk shit on Kozar.
Yeah, Kozar. Let's hope it disappears.
But also, I think Everts. Similarly had a bad day. Everts' season is very, very, very similar to last year, where he came back from injury, unexpectedly performed brilliantly to start with, and then hit a dip. Very, very similar.
I think that result he had coming back from injury, and that serious injury, is something that, we're seeing more of what you would expect for a rider returning to sort of to form and to confidence. And I think, Liam is kind of a sensitive guy and a sensitive rider. And, when he has good results, and I think we've seen this over the last 2 years when he was riding a KTM, when he would take a win, there will suddenly be another one the next week. Or, a podium, there'll be a sequence. And then, like you said, Lewis, there'll be this dip where he, and then he manages to arrest it through a start or just coming to the right track. And I think, Liam's biggest sort of area of work at the moment is just trying to stitch together a season, a consistent sort of plane, and really make those results count each weekend. That's, there's enough kind of mentality in the Everts family to sort of, talk him into that. So that will be the next step.
Also, kind of relating this to the Herlings conversation, potentially, if you're KTM, you do not want Chase to leave, Jeffrey to leave, and Längenfelder to leave with a number 1 plate.
Yes.
I think all of those things could potentially happen. Yes. It's a tough sell. So, and I think that with Chase and Längenfelder, it's more of we can't really do much to stop them. Whereas Herlings, just give him money.
Yeah, but then if you have Eli Tomac and you have Lucas Coenen, who could be with the number 1 plate for MXGP, And then you can still have like Sasha Kunin, who could suddenly transform into this picture of maturity and speed.
Or dust.
Or Kai de Wolf is still on an Austrian bike. I mean, there is a sort of plan Bs wherever you look. And I think that's probably why, together with the fact that KTM never really know how big is the pot of money, we haven't seen any sort of hardcore moves yet.
Yeah, true. Asen? Oh, look at that. We're so in sync. So
what do you think? Are you happy? Oh, sorry, tell the news first.
Yes. It was announced on Friday that Asen will host the 2027 Motocross of Nations. Yes. 2026 is France? Yes. Ernee, yes. Of course. If you never know where the nations is, just say Ernee and there's a high chance that you're correct.
Or Matterley Basin.
Or America. So Asen will return to host the 2027 Motocross of Nations. Hasn't hosted a Grand Prix since...
2018, since the Nations, right?
Yeah, the Nations in 19. I don't think because then we had COVID and we haven't been back since. So it hasn't featured in some almost 10 years by the time we get to the 2027 Motocross of Nations. It is a road race circuit for those of you who are completely new to following the European side of the sport. It's a TT circuit. Whatever, I don't even know what that means, but what is TT?
Tourist Trophy.
Okay. It's a TT circuit, so like street bikes and things. They truck in a load of sand, which makes it a more attractive man-made venue because it's not just fast and jumpy. It's arguably harder than Lommel with the sand they find. It's ridiculously difficult. And it's back. Initial reaction?
Same promoter as before. And Asen was always like a Grand Prix project that was building up towards that Motocross of Nations where the Netherlands took their famous victory, of course. It really depends on how you feel about man-made tracks and sort of transplanting motocross into a very sort of unnatural setting. I always thought that the Asen GP wasn't that bad. Like you said, the Sandy truck was extremely bumpy and rough. And also Asen, I mean, it has fantastic history. It's a really sort of hotbed of motorcycle racing fandom. The MotoGP round is incredibly well attended each year. The circuit itself celebrates its centenary in 2025. So there's a lot of sort of prestige and history attached to it. They have this huge Hertima grandstand that, I think can hold 40,000 people or something. So you can get a pretty good view of the track all the way around. I mean, there's lots of boxes that get ticked. And, in this day and age, Lewis, and we've said it many times, trying to stage an event like the Motocross of Nations is just simply too big for infrastructure and for fans, of most European venues. So I think it's a pretty good move. And, there's not many other options. And if we keep going back to Matterley into circuits in France, then I think the Nations is going to lose a little bit of its allure. So I think it's good that, I think it's Lee Van Dam. I'm sorry if I got that name wrong. The promoter has managed to find the backing and the cash to make it work again.
I heard that we're going back to America as soon as 2028. So yeah,
every 2 years, wasn't it?
Yeah. So like, I'm very much a supporter of whatever's different. I think it would be very hard to surprise us with a Nations announcement nowadays. And although this wasn't a complete surprise because there had been rumours, the rumours surprised us at least. So I'm for that because yes, Ernee next year. I love Ernee, but also we very much know what we're going to get, and what we're going to get is going to be amazing. So that's great, but Asen will be a completely different experience where no one will know what hotel they'll book and no one will know, like if that, as dumb as it sounds, that's kind of where we got into the Nations. It's become a little bit automatic for everyone.
Yeah, and Ernee next year is a real roll of the dice with the weather. I mean, of course, it was fantastic last year or the year before.
2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah. And I mean, even the weather for the Grand Prix at Ernee this weekend, I turned on the picture on Sunday morning and saw it was lashing down for the EMX races. And I thought, for fuck's sake, really? Is MXGP going to have another wet round? And then sort of the sun came out and, transformed the picture entirely. But, October for Asen could be pretty much the same thing. We could have another Nations that's very wet and damp and cold at Ernee. I don't know what we'll find at Ironman this September. But the other thing, Lewis, is where does the Nations fit in now? And also for Feld and SMX scheduling, can they afford to entertain the fact that this huge international race that has nothing to do with them or their business interests also be prioritized?
It's interesting because I think for Ironman, with potentially Chase changing teams, Eli changing teams, you could potentially have a subpar or not a American team on home soil, which I don't think we've had thus far. So what does that mean for the nations? Well, how is that received? There's always going to be a lot of toing and froing with the nations. I don't know if we'll ever get to a position where the nations isn't questioned from a participation point of view, from a scheduling point of view, etc., etc., etc. And maybe that's some of the willingness to go to these tried and tested venues, because maybe in front are like, we've got enough to deal with. The last thing we need is to go to a venue that we think is going to be good and then it fails and we've got to contend with that as well. I could fully understand that. That actually makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. I just hope the nations continues to matter. That's all I want, because I like the nations and I like Ernee.
Yeah, it was sketchy at Ernee for Team USA, and then of course last year as well, like you say, of riders being available. I actually have some sympathy for Hayden Deegan, every time the nations comes around, because for whatever he says or does always gets scrutinized, and it will be again this year. Even if he turns up and races and represents Team USA as the fastest 250 rider, then there'll still be people saying, well, why is this your first edition or whatever else? So there's always a lot of fuss around it. I'm just happy that Asen, I think it was a bit of an unexpected confirmation, and I think the potential is there for a good one.
It is funny. You explain to someone what the nations is who isn't involved in this sport, and they kind of raise an eyebrow at how weird it is that we have our own Olympics every year. And I've never thought about it like that.
It's not an Olympics.
Well, it's our Olympics.
No, it's not an Olympics.
How is it not our Olympics?
Olympics is a sporting contest of many, many different disciplines.
It's
more like a football World Cup where everyone is playing football and they're all from different countries, just like everyone's racing motocross and they're from different countries. The Team USA for the Olympics is a guy who's doing fencing, another one who's swimming, another one who's running. There's even a guy doing skateboarding these days, or BMX, I don't know.
Breakdancing?
There we go.
Yeah, but it's the best way to describe what the nations is.
No, it's not.
So you want everyone to say it's a football World Cup of motocross?
No, just say it's the FIFA World Cup. Or, if you want to get even more tricky, then say it's the Ryder Cup of motocross, where it's essentially America versus the rest of the world.
Content idea, Ironman, you need to go around and say to the fans, do you know what the FIFA World Cup is?
Oh, come on.
Well,
especially North America's in love with soccer now, isn't it?
that was a really
Lionel Messi,
good
MLS.
Accent. That was a really good accent. I'm blown away. On Asen, I want your gut reaction, yes or no. Is Jeffrey Herlings still a professional rider by the end of 2027?
For that race, yes.
Okay. So you think he's going to leave MXGP? Okay. Cold enough?
He's a bit older than Jeffrey, isn't he?
Oh, yeah, but I almost feel like cold enough is a safer bet.
But why couldn't you have a team with Kaida Wolf? Okay, now I'm struggling.
Well, at that point...
how do you say it? Goan Duensen? How do you say his name?
That's good enough for me.
Okay, I mean, he's just taking his first podium in MX250 after doing really well in MX25, so he's a Dutchie that's up and coming. You could have a new generation of Dutch riders.
Well, yeah, at that point, you'll have Kaida Wolf on a 450, Cass Volk on a 250.
There you go, Cass Volk as well, yeah.
But I almost wonder if that's part of the promoter's intentions. Like, this could potentially be Herlings' goodbye. Really could. If he does a 2-year... Yep. I mean, I think the chances of him doing a 2-year deal somewhere are maybe a little bit slim, but it's not out of the question.
No, not at all. If he changes team and brands, it's a 2-year thing, because you'd be mad to sort of become a Monster Energy Yamaha rider and only do a 1-year deal. I mean, you're going to need like a bit of an acclimatization.
Yeah, no one will want to do that either.
Yeah.
I just got an email that Beta USA have got a new headquarters, so congrats to them. I wonder if they flew Ben over to cut the ribbon. Before we go, Prox Racing Parts. What an incredible company. I love everything that Prox ProX, if you're American, stands for. They are the perfect solution if you want a competitive motorcycle at a cost-effective price. Of course, you, the listener, cannot get a factory bike. That's unrealistic. But what you can do is head to pro-x.com and get aftermarket parts for your steed that help you bridge the gap. Once again, if your clutch is slipping, your new goggles aren't going to help you. But the wide array of parts and possibilities at pro-x.com certainly will. And it's made even easier with an easy-to-use parts finder where you select the year, make, and model of your machine, hit search, and then away you go into the magical world of the Prox Chocolate Factory, where there's just magical parts for every single element of your machine. Prox Racing Parts, thank you for their support of this podcast. It's much appreciated. Great company, great guys. Well done, Prox.
Was Chase Sexton's clutch slipping when he ditched his goggles at Pala, or not?
No, I think that was a non-issue. There was many other issues, but I think that was a non-issue. But maybe he could have used Prox Racing Parts. It's not unheard of for a factory team to lean on the knowledge of Prox. Many manufacturers, etc., are just very aware of what Prox have going on. So why don't you get ahead of the game and not wait for someone to tell you about Prox? Well, technically, you've just done that because we've just told you. But don't wait.
The reads this week are just off the scale. I mean,
hold on.
You know.
So why don't you wait for someone else to tell you because you just heard it once? Why would you wait to hear it a second time? Act now.
You just appear on the Pulp Show and you just use all of your articulate kind of skills, all of my wit, capacity. Lewis, this weekend, while I'm kind of semi-choking on the dust of Torkessel in Germany, please take care of yourself, hydrate properly, do not wilt in Hangtown, okay?
Okay, well, more importantly, I have a list of things for you to do, content-wise. Right. One, I really want to know more about what Fantic have done this year to be so much better than last year.
And that's high up there.
I want to know if they have strayed from Yamaha a little bit, more so, and have become their own entity and are doing their own ideas. Like, is Koldenhoff using stuff that was never considered at Yamaha?
Okay. What else?
That's kind of it.
Well, I'll do my best.
Say hi to Kevin for me. I haven't texted Kevin in a long time. I like Kevin.
Oh, somebody else who's just like with Jeremy and on the discarded pile.
I really like Kevin. Honestly, Kevin Strybos may be one of my favourite people in the world. He's just funny.
Lewis, I'm not sure mentioning your name in the paddock these days is holds much currency. I'm
well,
a little bit afraid of the reactions I'll get.
You haven't got to the end of Pulp yet, and I don't know if you will. And seeing as you're now somewhat attached to me against your will, I think it's only fair that you know that when discussing MXGP and Yamaha's current situation in the paddock, I said that they were drunk at the wheel.
Oh, man.
So,
and we
as
do
your
a
friend,
podcast together, so my chances of getting in that awning, right? Okay.
Yeah. So as my friend, I think it's fair that you have all the facts. And it is, if someone says to you, "Why did Lewis say we're drunk at the wheel?" then you can't say, "Did he say that?" Because I did.
I could say he's in the US, so he's using a different type of medication. I apologize profusely, and I'll try to rein him in.
I also said, just to be clear again, to get to the forefront of issues you may have,
right. Okay.
I did say that they should hire me to fix it all, and it wouldn't be hard because I would essentially go in, put Yamaha in rice, and reset it to the 2021 lay of the land.
Okay.
I also said that they mistreated Jeremy and they shouldn't have done that. And that's fine.
And Ben?
No, I actually didn't mention Ben.
Oh, okay.
So maybe now he's on the list of...
Right, okay. So there's quite a bit of hate comms going on here. I'm going to need to maybe smooth things over.
It sounds more aggressive when I'm relaying it now. In the moment, it was in jest, somewhat.
Right.
With a hint of truth.
Well, we know the Europeans tend to sort of get the sarcasm a bit more. So you might be let off the hook. I'll ask.
Just say, oh no, you misunderstood. It's an English saying. Drunk at the wheel means you're having a jolly time.
I don't think we should encourage that kind of interpretation of it.
No, guys, don't drink and drive. It's not cool. Yeah. It's not cool. We're not going to be impressed if you drink and drive.
Lame-assed.
Although if you're driving and listening to this podcast, perhaps you should drink to try and make this bearable. Anyway, thank you to Polysport and Prox for their support of this podcast. Apologies for the reads this week. We'll do better. When I say we, I. There's a lot of work to do.
There's more humanity there. You know, we're not sort of polished and professional. We can't all be Jason Wygant.
We can't be Polysport and Prox. They are so amazing and so brilliant in what they do. Their offering is just exquisite. And unfortunately, I'm not as good as them. But then why would you expect me to be? I'm not amazing like them. How can I ever be? That's unobtainable for me. We only align with the best. Have a great time in Germany.
And to you, to Hangtown, remember what I said. Take care of yourself.
Say hi to Ben, Kevin, Jeremy, Pauls, Calvin, Dan.
I'm sure half of those people will probably want to spit in my face when I mention your name. I shall take like a Lewis-shaped cap.
You know what's funny? The one person who definitely would is Ben. We got issues. Anyway. Have a great time. I'm very jealous. Next week's podcast will be great because you're going to have so much to say, and I'm going to be picking your brain about how everyone is and how happy everyone is, and maybe we'll find out if certain people are drunk at the wheel or not. So stay tuned in 7 days' time when we return to discuss the Grand Prix of Germany at a historic circuit of Tuchenthal. It's going to be a bumper episode with a whole lot to get to, and we will see you then.